What's going on? Welcome to the Whole Elephant. It's been a little bit since we've done this, and I'm so excited to be back. We're going to be releasing a bunch of new episodes in a row here every Monday, and so I'm excited to get back in it with you guys and continue this journey of trying to understand different perspectives, different ways of life. And today, if you are a coffee person, then you joined at the right time today. Todd Goldsworthy, my guest, is the two-time US Brewing Cup champion. If you didn't know that was a thing, maybe go Google that before we start with Todd today. But we had a wonderful chat about all things coffee. Sit back, relax, maybe grab a cup of coffee for this one, and enjoy the chat. Todd, what's going on, man?
Hey, Eric, how's it going?
How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm enjoying this little break from the 100-degree weather.
Yeah, right. It's been brutal, like, and humid too.
Yeah, it's been just gross to be outside.
I can do the dry heat. Humidity is bad.
Agreed. I'm sitting outside right now, actually. I know my background shows I'm outside, but I'm legit outside because it's just nice.
It looks like you're in a majestic place right now with your background.
Well, my background is Yosemite, so that even when I'm not outside, I can pretend like I am.
Nice. Well, man, let's just dive right in. We want to talk about coffee. Tell me your coffee origin story. How did you first start getting into it on this level?
On this level, I mean, I started starting coffee, starting as a barista at Starbucks in college. Partially, I think because I was spending too much money at Starbucks. So I heard if I got a job there, I get free drinks when I'm working. I get discounts when I'm not working. I thought it was better to have them pay me than me pay them. Legit why I kind of started. And so I jumped in and kind of got into it. But I think I more fell in love with coffee through coffee shops and through the rituals that happen in coffee shops. Being able to get to see just how people interact, and how people are very specific about how they interact with their coffee. Whether that's just a person who comes in, the very much I just wanted a black cup of coffee. I want to get out of here. I'm in a hurry. To the person who it doesn't matter if it's 50 degrees outside or 110 outside. They want that latte extra, burning, scorching hot.
Yeah.
And just, really kind of learning more about people through coffee. So I think that's what really drew me into getting a deeper understanding and wanting to kind of hang out in coffee. When I graduated college, I kind of had two options of what I was doing. I was working still part-time at Starbucks, and I was working part-time in television news. And the big difference for me at the time was it was 2004. So we were finishing up the war in Iraq was kind of coming down and not being so big. So there was a couple of years there of really heavy things happening in television news and in what I was doing. And I was on the production side, and we were coming out of it all. And I kind of had to make a choice of either go all in here or they're offering me management promotion at Starbucks. And the big difference for me was people. And it wasn't that I didn't like the people at television news. It was I saw the same 12 to 15 people every single day, and you got to build relationships with them. But I liked the idea of having hundreds of people every single day that I got to interact with, and I got to see how different people are through that experience.
The general tale that I've heard for people who start to get into coffee is when they start to experience the actual coffee shops, the actual stuff like that, they start to sour on Starbucks. And did that happen for you?
Not that early on. But I will say I worked at Starbucks from 2001 to 2012. And so it's been 10 years since I've worked there, and I've probably been in a Starbucks maybe 10 times in the last 10 years since I left. And it's not necessarily that I soured on it. I just found the enjoyment of the beverage itself being better outside of Starbucks.
Mm.
The one thing though is when I do go to a Starbucks, it's typically when I'm traveling. And it's because I know what I'm going to get.
There's one everywhere. Yeah.
There's one everywhere. I know exactly what I'm going to get. It's not me questioning what's going to be there. And so I can easily go and enjoy the experience, knowing that it's going to be the same as if I was back home. And maybe I just can't find something else.
What do they do that has made it so popular? Like, what was it that made it burst onto the scene the way it did?
I think it was because it was first. Like, in a lot of ways, it had a lot of first. I wouldn't say it was perfectly first, but their whole history and story is Howard Schultz learning about this. So Howard Schultz didn't start Starbucks, and a lot of people think he did, but it was actually three guys, and one of them was the owner of Pete's Coffee later on. So he was one of the three guys. But it was three guys who started this, and they just sold beans in Pike Place Market, sold beans, but they would also sell equipment to brew coffee at home. And Howard Schultz was working in, I believe it was New York at the time, and he was selling this equipment or worked on the marketing team with this equipment and kept seeing so much equipment being sold to this little coffee shop. And so he went out and visited them and said, I should work for you. And they said, nope, we don't want you. And he was persistent about it. And he actually ended up starting a company called Il Giornale, which was a competitor of Starbucks. And then when these guys chose to sell Starbucks, they went to him and said, you want to buy it? And he's like, yes. Now let me go find a whole bunch of investors because I can't afford it.
Interesting.
And so, that was kind of his. And so he turned the Il Giornales into Starbucks. So he had, I don't know, 8 to 10 stores of Il Giornales at the time that he turned into Starbucks because he felt like that was a more well-known brand. He had worked for Starbucks for a short period of time in there. And during that, he had opened more similar to what we know now of coffee shops. But he wanted to sell the coffee. He felt like if people drink it every day, they're going to be more likely to buy the beans and find what they like. And he found this whole experience of the espresso machine and all that in Italy. He went to Italy on a trip, and he experienced Italian coffee. And his big difference was, if you go to Italy, the barista often has their back to you. They take your order, they turn around, make your coffee, turn around and give it to you. Right. So his thing was, well, let's put the espresso machine up front so there's customer experience. And so I think his focus on that customer experience part of it all and really looking at it from that helped drive it and draw it. And yeah, I mean, he was able to kind of kick that off and get going with it. Yeah. Coffee shops then I think have evolved a ton from there. And even just this week, big announcements coming from Starbucks of like, I'm going to make the numbers wrong, but I thought it was like $450 million. I was reading it this morning briefly of like this announcement of all the stuff they're going to do over the next 2 to 3 years to change a little bit of their customer experience as well as make their stores just more efficient. And I think they've always been on that cutting edge of stuff of being able to say, you look at, I think they make things explode for the rest of the industry also. Right. And that's a big part of what they do. When they put a big focus, this was probably 10 years ago now, but they put a huge focus one year on single origin coffees. And all these other, all these independent coffee shops have been focusing on single origin coffees, for over a decade themselves. And Starbucks sold single origin coffees, but it wasn't like a marketing focus. But the moment they put the marketing focus on it, all these other coffee shops benefited. Right. They put a huge focus on pour overs for a short period of time. And all these other independent coffee shops, people are going in there like, oh, you do pour overs just like Starbucks. And they're like, yeah, we've been doing pour overs for 15 years. Starbucks has been doing them for 15 months or whatever it is. Like, so, but, I think that in a lot of ways, they can lead what happens in the industry. And for coffee shops, you can't ignore what Starbucks is doing. Anybody in the coffee industry just can't ignore what they're doing. But they also give back to the coffee industry in a lot of different ways. And so I think there's a lot of benefits of them. I think there was many years where they were very disliked within the industry. And we saw that shift happening around 2010 to 2014, where Starbucks got more involved in the coffee industry in ways that is promoting specialty coffee and has brought a lot more respect in the industry to what they do.
Oh, interesting. So what was your first job outside of Starbucks in the coffee world?
It was with Clutch. So I met Heather Perry. I want to say it was probably 2009 or 2010 at a random coffee event. I was a district manager for Starbucks in Hollywood, and a flyer ended up in one of my stores about a coffee competition happening literally across the street from the store one weekend. And so I was like, all right, this is happening in the middle of my district. It's all about coffee. Let me go see what this is. And I walked in, and I looked lost because as a district manager at the time, we were very dressed up. I was wearing a tie, and I walk in, and nobody's dressed nearly as nice as I am. Yeah. And this girl walks up to me. Her name's Maria, and we're still friends today. But this was the first time I remember meeting Maria. She walks up to me and she goes, "Hi, you look lost." I was just like, yeah, what is going on here? It's my first experience into coffee competitions and seeing what was happening. And so she walked me around and kind of showed me what was going on and talked to me about it all. And interestingly enough, she walks me over to this espresso machine where they're serving free coffee. And she goes, "This here is a local coffee roasting company. They're called Clutch Coffee. They're family owned and operated." And that was my first introduction to Clutch. She introduces me to this, and and I'm going through and let's get you a coffee. And so she orders me a coffee, and then it's served to me. And she goes, "Serving you is actually one of the family members. This is Holly Perry. Her sister's a big deal in the coffee industry. Her family owns this company. Little did I know that many years later, Holly would become my wife."
Yeah.
So that was the first time. She does not remember meeting me then, but I remember. But I remember that introduction to the whole thing and got to know the industry. A few months later, I met Heather, and just through coffee events, got to know their family, and they were opening a cafe inside LAX. So multiple conversations where they asked me to manage it and run it, and they wanted me to go, and I was just like, yeah, I don't really feel like driving to LAX every day, dealing with security every day. Sure. Cranky travelers every day. None of this sounds fun to me. So I turned them down multiple times. And then one day I ran into Mike, the owner, and he and I were talking, and I said, "What else do you have? Like, I'm not going to do LAX. So let's just put that off the table. What else do you have?" And he goes, "We've been talking about having somebody run our wholesale department. How do you feel about doing that?" I don't know anything about wholesale, but sure, let's talk about it. And I think at the time I was at a point at Starbucks. I was a district manager, and there were two places I could go from there. I could go up to be a regional director, which did not sound interesting or fun to me at the time, or I could move to Seattle and work in the corporate offices, which I explored. I had looked at that point. I'd even interviewed through that, and I just wasn't quite sold on that.
Right.
So I decided, all right, let's jump ship and check out what it means to work with independent coffee shops working for a small family company.
Yeah.
And that was my jump.
I want to go back a little bit. You said, the whole idea of a coffee competition. And I know that's the competition aspect has been a big part of your journey over the last couple of years. What the heck is a coffee competition? what happens?
Right.
How do you get judged? How do you win? What in the world is a coffee competition?
So there are quite a few these days. These days there's a lot, but the big two still within the industry, are the Barista competition and Brewers Cup competition. So Brewers Cup is what I did. I'm going to just real briefly talk about Barista. Barista is simply it's 15 minutes. You have they have 4 judges who are sensory judges, and then a head judge and some technical judges. They actually have a lot of judges, and they basically have to make 3 courses for these judges in 15 minutes and explain a story around this. Espresso with milk, and a very signature beverage of their choice. So it's a big one around espresso, and there's a lot of points involved in this, and a lot of technicalities that you can get themed on points on.
And
so that's the big
you have
one.
To make a little foam squirrel at the top or something.
You gotta make a little foam swirl on the top of some little sort, and it's gotta look symmetrical, and they do judge on how that looks.
Wow.
So that's one. That's the big one. Then the other big one is Brewers Cup, which is where I got involved. And I'm a black, just like people I talked about, like rituals were a big thing that brought me into coffee. I'm a black coffee drinker. It's typically 99 out of 100 visits to a coffee shop, I'm getting black coffee of some sort. And so, I thought, well, if that's what I enjoy drinking, if I want to compete in something, I should get better at that. And so I decided to throw my hat in at Brewers Cup. And Brewers Cup is simply a manual brewing competition, brewing black coffee. There's 2 parts to it. Part 1 is a blind aspect. You're given 10 minutes. You are given a 12-ounce bag of coffee that you know nothing about. They give you a tiny bit of information. That's typically a wash process coffee. It's a little bit of information about it, but you don't know what country it's grown in. You know nothing about it. So you're just given this coffee and 10 minutes to brew it. You get a little bit of time to play with it, and over the years, that's kind of changed how much time you get to play with it. The early years, you got it the day before competition. In my last 2 years competing, you got it 1 hour before you had to brew it for judges. Oh, wow. So you got 1 hour to play with it, basically, and then you had to do it. So it's blind in that way, but it's also blind for the judges. So they have no idea who's brewing it. They have no idea how they're brewing it. They don't get to see anything. They get zero information as well. They simply just taste. So it's all in how good can you make this taste. Is it
subjective to the judges, or are the judges going off of some sort of criteria?
They have a scoring criteria. So they score. The big ones are aroma, acidity, body, flavor. But there's a balance score in there. They get an overall score. So they spend 2 days. Basically, they spend 2 days before the competition tasting this coffee in every which way that people can brew it. People screw it up on purpose. People try to make it taste good for them all over the place. All sorts of different brewing methods. Also, they can taste the variety of it and calibrate themselves. So they're all calibrated to each other. So when they taste it, it can be all the same. They also have, so there's 3 of those tasting, and there's a head judge who will taste every single cup to check to make sure, okay, if you're scoring that cup at 8 for acidity and you're scoring your cup at 8 for acidity, they're tasting to make sure that they agree that the acidity in both tastes the same, so that if you're both giving it 8, it should taste the same, or they're tasting saying, no. Yeah, or they're tasting and saying, no, your quality is a half point better than theirs. So either you have to go up a half point, or they got to go down a half point, and there's conversation there that happens to figure out. So there's a lot that goes into that one, and through that, that at the end of that, that gets added. That's half your score as a finals in the final competition. So half your score is on this obscure coffee you don't know anything about. Your other half is what they call open service. So you get to bring whatever kind of coffee you want. You can't do flavored coffees. There are some rules around that, but you kind of bring whatever coffee you want. You can use, different kinds of water. It was something I always made my own water using specific minerals that help fit that coffee specifically. You can use your own grinder. You can use whatever brewing device, and you have 3 judges sitting in front of you. And you got to present a story and have customer service with this. So you have now added on a presentation is part of it. Your customer service experience is now part of this. Your head judge is tasting, and actually your head judge is paying attention to making sure your emotions that you're going through are the same for each cup. So they'll literally count if you're pouring your manual brew pour over. If you're doing a pour over, they will count how many times you swirl each time you pour, right. And make sure that each pulse is the exact same for each cup. So they're really scoring how robotic you are in a lot of ways. And you go through that, and that one's just a whole experience because you get so connected to a cup of coffee. When I competed, my years of competing, the first year I went and did this, I won in 2014. I used a coffee from a farm in Panama, Esmeralda, and I got so connected to this coffee and really got to do it. And on the day I competed in my finals, I got to meet the producer, Rachel, who produced this coffee. And over the years, then I really got to know Rachel. I got to go visit her farm. I spent some time with her whole family, her brother, her parents. I've had many meals with all of them, and really got to know them. And so each year when I was competing, I just continued coming back to their coffee. Not only they have phenomenal coffee, but I just felt a closer connection, right. Having been on the farm, walking the farm, and getting to know the things that they do more intimately, to be able to share that story. So I think a lot of competition is there's I think two big things that come out of competition. One is innovation. There's a lot of innovation that happens. I think that when I competed in 2014, a big thing I talked about was the water. I had water made specifically for this coffee to really enhance the flavor characteristics. And it was not, we always talked about having good quality water for your coffee. I think before that, there wasn't a lot of conversation around how different waters can bring out aspects of different coffees. Like you can have a very specific water that is meant for coffee to really enhance the characteristics of it. So going kind of that deep in that way, right. I think that's a big part of it. And that's the big thing, is looking at how innovation can really help drive the industry forward. And even if it's just opening up further conversations, because really, is a coffee shop going to have 8 different waters for 8 different coffees they're serving? I really hope not. I really hope nobody's going that far. But I think it can open up a conversation around the water we're using, and how cafes can even just adjust their water for the cafe for the roast profile that they're utilizing in the cafe to enhance things there. So it's really about that qualitative taste. So that's a big part of the innovation side. The other big thing I think is telling the stories, the storytelling. So being able to really showcase what a farmer, what a producer is doing, and really be able to help tell their story. Right. My 2016 year, I was really focused on trying to tell the story of the farmer, how that interacts with the story of the roaster, and how that interacts with the story of me as the brewer, and how the three of us play important roles. So I think there's, being able to get that out there a little bit further than it's been before. And I think through competition, it's also people have been able to showcase different regions. I later became a judge, and I had my first coffee from Myanmar. That somebody was brought in this amazing coffee from Myanmar, and I, as a judge, before that point never gotten to taste coffee from that region, and it's kind of neat and different that people are bringing out, bringing stuff forward that we just wouldn't talk about regularly.
Yeah, so you won the US Brewers Cup twice, right? And then you go to World. You go to the world level. But I think this is true. No American has ever won at the world level. Is that true?
No, that is not true. Actually, So I won 20. I won 2014 and 2016. But in 2013, an American won the Brewers Cup.
Oh, got it.
And actually, 2013 was a big year because an American won Barista and an American won Brewers Cup that year. That was America's big year. But beyond that, we have, I can't think of any Americans who have won, though, either of them since.
You mentioned the farms, and whenever you go to a coffee shop and you're looking at the bags and the places of origin and all that stuff, you're looking at a lot of third world countries that these beans are coming out of. It seems like that would be a breeding ground for exploitation, all those things, taking advantage of these farmers that are not wealthy and are in their third world country, living on their farm, making coffee. What has that process been like for you to see that, and what are the ways that people kind of are guarding against that?
So from my experience, I've been, the two places I've been are Panama and Brazil. Very, very different coffee growing regions. And even within Brazil, it has a huge difference from region to region and place to place. There's huge farms, and then there's really small family farms. And I think from what I've seen and being out there is, there's a lot of organizations who are trying to help support these farms. You have Fair Trade USA, fair trade organizations who really get in there and try to make sure farmers are getting paid a premium price for their coffee that they can live off of. You have just roasters who have gotten to know farmers, and so they pay through their direct trade programs, typically above fair trade prices. But again, it doesn't flourish as far and as wide out there. I think there's a lot of organizations who are getting out there and try to navigate through, and I'm sure there's still farms who struggle through that. There's what we all call the C market, the commodity market for coffee, and that price is so low typically that if a farmer is paid that price, they're losing money on their farm. And at some point they weigh out that option of, well, do I just not pick at all then? And there's been times where farmers haven't picked because it costs them more money to pick than it does to not. So what I've seen out there, I mean, I've heard of things of like people are like, oh, there's probably child labor happening. And usually the only children I've ever seen on farms is just like when our kids come to work with us. They're like, oh, Daddy, I want to come to work with you. And they come and they quote unquote work with you for 5 minutes, and then they're bored and running off and coloring or chasing somebody else around. Or you see kids running through farms playing hide and seek. I mean, that's typically what I've seen out there, and it's more that kind of stuff that's happening. But I think it's just the more there's been conversation around it, and again, that's where competitions have helped really kind of bring some of this stuff to light. The more that we continue to talk about it, the more organizations evolve and find ways to really help support and look for those farms that are out there in the middle of Nowheresville that are not being supported, and try to help bring them along. There's co-ops in every country. There are people trying to bring that up. But I think that, coffee, all the way even here in the U.S., we call it pennies profit business. The thing with coffee shops themselves, if you own one single coffee shop, you're struggling to pay yourself. If you own and run one, and that's just the reality of the business. It's it's trying to find that balance of like, okay, well, it costs me X amount of money to run this business, or let's just say to make this latte. It costs me this much to make this latte, but how much are people actually willing to pay for this? And we look at that through. I like to look at it through all beverages. We look at just where beer has come and gone from, where hard cider has come and gone from, where wine has come and gone from. And you continue to see that. My wife and I got married in Paso Robles, big wine country.
Yeah.
And we've been going to Paso Robles. We had our first trip there. I think it was 2015. We went up to Paso Robles and fell in love with the region. And just looking at the way prices have increased there from 2015 to today. I mean, we used to pay like a tasting fee to try their wines was, $5 or $10 at a lot of wineries.
Right.
And we're planning to go back for our anniversary in a couple of weeks, and we're reading things of like $25 and $30 for tasting fees, and we're just like, ooh, that's gone up quite a bit. But we all can look at cost of living, all that kind of stuff going up. But I think the evolution of all of that stuff of trying to see the economics of it.
Right.
And in coffee, there's first the farm, paying $2 a pound for green coffee is a plate premium right now. I mean, that's above C market price, and that might be a fair trade price. And then the direct traders come in, they're paying $2.50 or $3 a pound. And then, for even better coffees, $4 and $5 a pound. But, then that comes here to the US. Obviously, they have shipping fees. Now they got paid that was just the price to the farmer. And now they come here and they have all the shipping fees and things like that. So a roaster is then roasting it, and coffee loses weight in roasting. As you cook it, the moisture kicks off. So the moisture goes away. So a pound of coffee is now somewhere around 0.8 to 0.85 pounds. So you lose 15 to 20% on a lot of roasts.
Yeah.
So, okay, now your per pound price has gone up, and then they're looking at all their costs, and they got to sell it. So a roaster might be selling it for, they bought it for $2.50 or $3 a pound in theory, but through all those costs, they're selling it wholesale, maybe about $10 a pound.
Right.
So now, the coffee shop's buying it $10 a pound, and they're turning around and looking at, making it in shop. They have the labor costs and all their electricity and all their overhead and everything like that. And the roaster didn't make very much off of that. They hopefully made a profit, and doing enough volume they can profit to stay in business. For me, I hear the word sustainability a lot in coffee and in the world. And to me, sustainability is, I think some people go the environmental side when they hear sustainability. For me, I always hear sustainability and think the business side. If we're sustainable, then people are making a profit to be able to pay their employees, to be able to keep going, to be able to put money back into the business, so the business can be around 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 years from now.
Yeah, we do talk about sustainability that way. Like, the sustainability of keeping the product around, but not necessarily the sustainability of keeping the system, to keep the farm around, to keep the humans around supporting it. That's really interesting.
Yeah. So when I think about and that's for me, whenever I think about sustainability, I think about the business. If this business keeps going, they're paying their vendors, they're paying all these employees, they're paying people, and it goes all through that supply chain from the farmer all the way to that coffee shop. And then the coffee shop's paying all their bills. And at the end of the day, they're looking back and be like, all right, I didn't pay myself anything yet. And I have, a few $100s left in the bank at the end of the month. Yeah. And until a coffee shop hits either a certain volume, or typically cafes start to open a second or third location, that's when they're actually starting to make some money. To where, I think a lot of people, I don't say this, think I know, because I talk to people who are like, oh, why'd you open a coffee shop? Well, Starbucks makes so much money. Figured if I open a shop, I can make money too. There's that side. Otherwise, people either open it for the passion, or they open it because they hear Starbucks makes money.
Right. Well, there's like a cool factor too. Like, we can have artists come and hang paintings, and it'll be a coffee shop. We'll have musicians come in. It'll be like the cool place for everyone to come hang out.
Yeah. and when that actually happens and gets created, it's that really fun atmosphere, and you start to see all the different rituals of different people, what they experience, and you get that guy who comes in and gets their small coffee and gets 2 stir sticks and sets the 2 stir sticks on the table and takes their lid off the coffee and sets their lid on the stir stick so it doesn't touch the table, because that's their ritual. I had this guy, and I would never forget. I had this guy 20 years ago, and I never will forget him, because he fascinated me in how every single day he was like clockwork. There's coffee shops have created a routine for people, a place for them to have routine, not just a place for connection, a place for the musicians, a place for artists. It's I think it's so multifaceted. There's so much that happens within a coffee shop.
Sure.
It's amazing. Yeah.
So I want to bring it home a little bit. Well, first of
Yeah.
all, I think one of the things that I appreciate about you is you either are not pretentious about what people like to drink or you keep it to yourself. One of the two.
I think I went through a pretentious phase.
Oh, yeah.
I definitely went through that.
Yeah.
I think I got a little pretentious there with like what I drink and why people drink. And I went through that, and I think I remember actually going through this one interview with somebody, and similar to this kind of a concept of a podcast like thing, and we were talking about it, and it kind of brought me back to why I started liking coffee in the first place. What these kind of the rituals, the very differences people have, and I remember a coffee shop in downtown LA, Handsome Coffee. They only lasted a few years, but they refused to allow people to put milk in their coffee. I come in and order a cup of coffee. They had no creamer. And when someone asked for it, their response was, "We believe our coffee is sweet enough as it is."
Wow.
And I think, and at first I was like, wow, this is very forward-thinking coffee shop. And I remember being there one day and sitting at the bar having my coffee. And that's how I enjoy it. So I was fine with it.
Yeah.
And I remember this older woman who reminded me, looking at her, of my grandma.
Sure.
And my grandma was the person who brewed a cup of coffee and microwaved it for days. One pot of coffee lasted her like 3 or 4 days, because every day she just would take it out, she put it in the fridge, take it out, microwave it, and drink more.
Yeah.
And to me, it's so gross, but that's what she did. That's how she. And I remember this grandma asking for cream, and the barista said, "We believe our coffee is sweet enough as it is." And she just looked, so she goes, "Okay, but where's the creamer?" If you can believe that. And she sat there and she's like, "No, I don't understand." And she goes, "So you really like, I see you have milk back there you're using to make other beverages. Can I have a little bit of it?" And the barista literally said no.
Wow.
And I remember looking at him at that point being like, this is not, no. Like, people are going to be ritualistic with their coffee, and they have their way. They enjoy it. And why are we the ones who are becoming gatekeepers of saying how you have to enjoy your coffee?
Yeah.
For sure, we want people to understand the artistry of it as baristas and all that kind of stuff. But I think at the end of the day, they're paying for it. They're spending their hard-earned money on something they want to enjoy themselves. And I'm sure there's plenty of stuff out there that I do that the artist behind it's like, no, that's not what it was intended for. Yeah. But that's how I like it and I enjoy it. So I'm going to do it the way that's going to make me happy.
Yeah.
And as long as I'm not hurting anybody else, who cares?
Yeah.
So I definitely think I
had a similar experience in that I went to a coffee shop, and I won't name it, but it's a well-known chain coffee shop. And I went in and they didn't have a menu, and I knew nothing about coffee. And so I had no idea what to order because there was no menu to look at. I felt so uncomfortable that I went to the end of what I was supposed to order.
Yeah, and that's exactly. And I think there was a phase there where that was starting to really happen. Coffee shops are opening, trying to do that kind of thing and be something like that. And I think most have backed off who tried that. Or I only bring up Handsome's name because they're no longer in business. Right. They weren't doing so well. They were. I don't know all the ins and outs of it, but they got bought by Blue Bottle, and I moved on. But I think that there was this point where there were people trying to create that, and I just don't think that we consumers, that they were being okay with it. Consumers were, they were saying what they like and didn't like with their dollars. Right. And if you go in and have a really bad experience, not only do you not come back, but you tell people about that bad experience.
Right. Is there something that people are doing wrong at home that could make their coffee just a little bit better? Like what are like the common mistakes that you see of people's brewing situation?
But I've used this story for years because this is one of my favorite stories. It was back in my early days of Starbucks, and this woman came in, and she was like always saying how her coffee can never taste the same at home as it does in Starbucks. And she bought her beans at Starbucks. We ground it for her, so we got her to buy a grinder and grind fresh at home to make it a little bit better. We went through, and then this was a week after week thing for many, many weeks of her coming in. And I remember I personally had multiple conversations with her, going through how to brew coffee, going through a good proportion of coffee to water to use that we were recommending at the time, and going through. So the big things with coffee are proportion, grind, water, freshness. Those are the top four. And if you look at that proportion, typically I say look at what the roaster recommends, because different roasters know their coffee differently, and the person grind, making sure that grind is right for the type of brew method you're doing. And so working with your coffee shop to figure that out, and freshness of that. And then we got to water, and she kept telling me how she buys her water. She gets store-bought water. And so we're kind of going through different things. And so one day I just said, what, bring in the water you use. Like let's look at it. Maybe there's something. And she goes, oh, I actually just went to the store. I have some in the car. Let me go get it. She goes out to the car, and she comes in, and she brings in this 1 liter bottle of water. She goes, it's my favorite. And we look at it, and it's strawberry flavored water.
No way.
And I will never forget that we're staring at, and I'm just looking at it, and I just stood back and stared at it, and she's like, but it's my favorite. It's her favorite water, and it's filtered, and all this. She talked all these great things about it, but she never even thought twice about the fact that the water is strawberry flavored. So she's imparting that into the coffee, and I've used that in so many scenarios over the years because it's because it's strawberry flavored water. And as soon as I said that to her, she's like, yeah. She goes, oh, like it clicked as soon as I said it's strawberry flavored water. It finally clicked to her. But I do think that there's there's something to be said with the water we use, and the water we have here in Southern California is awful.
Yeah,
it is terrible.
Yeah,
and what a lot of people don't realize is throughout the year, what is going even into your tap system is from different reservoirs, and as you get into droughts like this, it changes even more often. And so as we're going through, it's changing so much. So even if you just use a Brita, which if at minimum using a Brita is great, I actually do that a majority of the time at home. Simply use a Brita, but it is going to change the flavor of your coffee throughout the year because of what started in the water can't all be filtered out. So there are.
So is like Klatch buying water, or do you just filter the crap out of it when you were there?
So when you go to a good coffee shop like Klatch and different ones, they're using a full reverse osmosis system and adding minerals back in. So they're taking as much out of it, as much out of that thing as can, try to get as close to distilled as possible, and then have a back end adding of specific minerals back in. So that's an easy way to do it. There's a company called Third Wave Water. There's these little distilled packets. You take a packet, you put it inside a 1 gallon of distilled water. So you can buy distilled water at grocery stores. You put that in it, and it's the same thing. It's the distilled water has all the stuff pulled out of it. You're adding your own minerals back in. And so every once in a while, when I want to feel fancy at home, that's what I do. I have that little packet. I throw it in distilled water. I mix it up, and I make some water at home. And anytime we get something a little bit higher end or fancier or just whatever, I do that for our coffee at home. But most days I personally use a Brita. It does a decent job of cleaning up the water. So it kind of varies a little bit in how much. But if you are realizing like how much different your coffee at home is from a coffee shop, 9 times out of 10, I feel like I could be making that percentage up, but I feel like it's the water.
Yeah. Well, man, my one of my reasons for starting this podcast was because there's lots of cool jobs and careers that I know nothing about. Coffee. Yeah. You've introduced me to a lot over the years. I mean, I still have the box.
Yeah.
The $100 cup of coffee I bought from you, and you came and for me. This was quite
that farm. that farm just broke a new record last week or 2 weeks ago. They just sold their coffee. They only had I think it was 7 pounds of this coffee. They sold it for over $6,000 a pound.
Oh my goodness.
Just last week or 2 weeks ago through an auction. And it's the new world record from that same farm.
Wow. Well, this one was the world record when we drank it, right?
It was.
It was.
Yes, that was the world record when we drank it. And that same farm just broke the world record again.
Wow. People always ask me like what it tasted like. And like watermelon Jolly Rancher was one of the notes on it, which you could totally taste. What I equated it to was like high-end fashion. Like on the runway, it looks really cool, but I would never like wear it out on the street store. You know what I mean? Like it tasted really cool, but like that's not what I want for my everyday cup of coffee. Does that make sense?
Oh, exactly. No, that's a great thing of it. There's a processing method called natural process, which that coffee was. And a lot of natural coffees are great. I always say they're great for helping people understand and realize that the coffee doesn't just taste like coffee. Right. Like whenever would get in front of somebody and they go, "Oh yeah, coffee just tastes like coffee," I would say, "Okay, let me brew this for you." And natural coffees are typically fruity, so that's the easiest way in general.
It tasted like a coffee tea hybrid, sort of. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And so there's a lot of that kind of stuff out there. This one was that one was insanely complex and delicate, and like you said, watermelon candy was I remember that being a great descriptor of that coffee. So it's a fun way of being able to do it. But yeah, I always tell people natural coffees are really fun to taste. They're really fun to try, enjoy with a friend. But it's not what I want to drink every day. No. Not what I want to have every day.
That experience was hilarious too, because we did it in my office and there was like 8 of us and we were just passing around this little cup, taking little
tiny cup,
on it, taking a little sip. The other reason I started this podcast was just my own faith journey and wanting to get out of my bubble of what I've experienced and what I know and believe. So I like to keep this part pretty non-agenda or agenda-free and open-ended. Faith, spirituality, God, no God, what happens when we die, anything that comes to mind that, is either part of your journey or you're out now.
Oh, there's so much. So I will share this. So I don't know if you even know this, Eric, but next week will hit 2 years since I left Clutch.
Yeah.
So I hit next year will be next week will be 2 years since I left Clutch, and I haven't worked in coffee since. And I actually just got a new job. So you and I will have to do a new podcast in like a year or two after I've been doing this. But I just got a job as a financial advisor to start. Yeah, so I start in November, and it's a whole new career for me. But I think that, and this will lead a little bit back to spirituality. But I think that, in life, you find there's we just go through seasons. We go through seasons of, why we believe what we believe. I think, like you said, and it made me think of this because you said right now. Like, where do you find yourself right now? Because I can look back in my life at different, there's very different points in my life where it's very clear to me now, not then, but now, what I was believing and why I was doing the things I was doing. I think as we get older, it's a little easier to see the now than it was then. I can look back to my 16-year-old self and I had no idea that at that time what was happening would change my trajectory in such a way, in different aspects. And so, the last 2 years for me have been just some of the coolest stuff ever. So my son turns 2 next week. And, when my wife went into labor the day before he was born, I was taking paternity leave. She went to labor. I sent a message to the office that labor started, and I offered to do next week, do a day if I still need to transition stuff, but I'm going to take some time off. And during that time off, decided not to go back. And I've gotten to spend the last 2, and the plan was 1 year, but I've gotten to spend 2 years now of being a stay-at-home dad. And So I have, my son turning 2. I have 2 older boys who are 14 and 16, and getting to experience God through teenagers at the same time as an infant and toddler. It's so, I don't even know if I have the words to describe it, because with the teenagers, it's obviously, it's actual conversations now. It's actual, what's happening in life. What do you really think about that with them? And helps me think about stuff. Helps me to really think about how I raise them and what I'm doing with now a toddler, and how he's going to get raised in the same way. And what, funny thing was, I was having a conversation with one of them, and they're like, are you going to force him to be friends with your friends' kids? Because that's not fun. And I was like, well, what do you mean? They're like, when we were little, you made us go play with this kid and this kid because you were friends with their parents. We were forced to, and, can't just let him have his own friends. And it really got me thinking of that, of like, as a parent, you want to hang out with your friends, and when they have kids, it's easy and it's a lot easier. And, I'm not going to not like, they're 2. They don't really get much choice. Much decision around that. But it was fascinating to hear that from my teenagers, of saying like, yeah, we didn't like that very much. Like, and at what age do you stop that? And, with me and my own spiritual journey, I have just found that I'm at a point where I feel like I have a great relationship with God. I believe in God. I believe in Jesus. I have been through tons of trials and tribulations in life. And for me, I continuously see where God shows up for me, even in those hard times. But I think for me right now, I'm at a point where I am trying to really not go to God when things are bad, but continuously go to God while things are good. And I think it's an easy thing I've looked at back in my life as like, things are bad, I go to God, I pray, I get really spiritual, I'm at church all the time, I'm all those kind of things. And things turn around, start doing really well. And then I take a back seat and I just ride the ride, and I just, let it happen. And then when turmoil happens, then I go back to praying, and I go back to reading scripture, and I go back to, whatever that is. And so for me right now, I'm like, yeah, exactly. And so for me right now, things are great. And so I'm in that place of, I don't want to fall back into that same pattern of just sitting back and relaxing and easing into it. And I'm also at a point where I just, I used to think in my younger self that if I'm not going to church regularly, then I'm not connecting with God. And I think, and for me now, the pandemic, I think, helped with that, because it was like, well, there's no physical church to go to. The force, there is a God outside of it. But not having a physical place to go for a period of time, I think helped me to be able to say, well, that's okay.
Sure.
But I need to make sure that those I'm surrounding myself with on a day-to-day, weekly, whatever basis are the types of people that I'm okay having those. I think I found groups of people that have deeper conversations with because of it,
right?
Because of the lack of church physical space. Even though I wasn't having deep conversations in the physical space,
right?
I think it opened that door for me to say, well, I don't need a physical space. And I know that's not good for churches right now, that people step back and say, because churches hurt financially when we don't physically show up. Churches hurt volunteer wise. Churches hurt in a lot of ways. But I think that for me, I've just found that space of where it's okay not to physically be there. But I think I also recently, my wife and I, Holly and I, just kind of recently started talking about how we also miss that regular community. So I think for me, it's trying to find that balance of, one, I'm in a good place, things are doing well, so I want to continue to show up with God. First, second, keep people around me in a very regular, consistent pattern. I'm in a men's group right now, and I'm 40. This is the first time I've ever been in a men's group. So to have that and find that and be able to have a regular community of people that I connect with is something I've never had before, and it's something I didn't realize how important it could be for my own personal journey.
Sure.
More important to me right now than physically being in a building.
You said,
but also the physical building community side.
No, yeah, for sure. You said that you get to experience God through your teenagers and through your toddlers.
Yes.
What does that mean to you? Like, how are you experiencing God through them? Do you feel?
I think for the toddler's the easiest one. I mean, the things that like a toddler sees and is excited about and happy about, just simple things like going to Descanso Gardens and you walk in and he sees a turtle, and it's just like that. But you just step back and you're like the miracles of what God has created and how much on a daily basis a toddler sees new things, learns new things, grows, and just the unconditional love that they give out, like seeing how I see something that maybe somebody else does, and I'm a little annoyed by something I see, but they're oblivious to all of that stuff that's happening in life, and they just see joy in everything. There's just so much joy in everything for them. So I think with a toddler, it's so simple and easy. And then with the teenagers, it's about going deeper. It's about, daily life things happening and having those conversations, but then also bringing it back to Jesus, having the ability to bring it back and talk about what does that mean for us as Christians with what you're experiencing, through all this stuff with COVID, through all this stuff that happens in a daily life, through the ups and downs of, the life things that happen that just are disappointing sometimes. My oldest has a job now, and he's a lifeguard so he got to do it through the summer, and now he's only doing 1 day a week on the weekends. But then he gets scheduled at the same time as his water polo match and trying to get that figured out. And it's like, well, what does responsibility look like? Last week he had that, and he's like, Friday night he goes, Dad, maybe I'll just call in sick tomorrow. And I was like, whoa. We're not starting that as a 16-year-old thinking that that's an acceptable behavior, that there's something else you prefer to do that you would rather be doing than working. Yeah. You don't get to just call in sick. And so we got to have at first he's like, fine. And I was like, no, let's actually have a conversation about what does that mean as responsibility?
Yeah.
And, and where does responsibility lie for us as a human? Like, you don't even have to bring that into the Christian side of it, but as a person, as a human, as other people who are relying on you to just show up and spend the 5 hours, making sure they don't drown.
Sure. Awesome, man. I appreciate you doing this so much. Coffee has been a big part of my life. Like the last 8 years, I've just been learning and trying new things and trying not to become pretentious about it. Drink what you want. I'm not at all. Like I love really good coffee shops and getting that pour over, but I also love like stale diner coffee. Like in the thick ceramic mug, you know what I mean? Like I feel like I love all of it depending on the situation I'm in.
What's really funny, that's my wife loves the high-end stuff. She loves like that reminder of where coffee's been by doing that. Yeah. She hates the in-between. She hates the mediocre. Yeah. She loves the good. She actually, when we go places, something she's like, I will take a bad cup of coffee, I'll doctor it up and enjoy that thing. But when it's like should have been good and it's not, and it's that mediocre, and they didn't put too much care into it, it's like, that's where she gets annoyed. But that's the fine. I can't. I have a hard time with the diner stuff these days myself personally. But she's like that. Yeah, I think there's something to say about it.
Awesome, man. I appreciate you,
sure,
buddy.
Of course, it's good to connect and chat with you. And this is cool. I listened to a couple of your podcasts to kind of hear what your what you do there, and I was like, oh, I enjoy these. These are good. They're fun.
Appreciate it.
I don't remember which one it was, but I had one, Levi. Yeah, Levi, my 14-year-old, sat in the car and he's like, "Why are we listening to this?" I was like, "Because I'm going to be on this podcast in a couple of weeks, so I want to see what it's like." And I don't remember who was on. It was a woman. I don't remember who she was exactly, but we had a nice little conversation about your podcast. So
Cool.
opened that door for the conversation, which was cool.
Man, we can't live life without conversations. Is the answer to all, like literally all our problems. I think is just having conversations and talking about stuff.
For sure.
All right. Thanks, brother. Appreciate you.
Thank you. You have a good one.